October is Domestic Violence Awareness Month, as many of you know, and we have the conference later this month with MEN. And so I just wanted to round out our presentations about domestic violence by inviting some people from the YWCA to speak with us about working with the survivors. So we have with us today B. Esbit. She's the therapy program manager at the YWCA. She's worked with them for 7 years, and in close partnership with a team of clinical supervisors, she's expanded their therapy services. In her previous role as an advocate, she was stationed at the Sonoma County Sheriff's Office. She provided domestic violence advocacy and support group facilitation for victims of domestic violence. As an advocate, she helped clients connect with community resources, accompanied clients to a restraining order court, and went into classrooms across the county to educate students on teen dating, violence, and healthy dating. And then we also have Maggie Caffery. She's a licensed marriage and family therapist. She has extensive training in the treatment of trauma. Her work has been informed by therapists such as Janina Fisher, Bessel Vanderkork, Judy Herman, Dan Siegel, and Pat Ogden, and others. And these therapists have imparted the importance of vigorously attending to the successes and accomplishments of these women and the power of reframing their symptoms as creative methods of survival. And we also have Muncie Harper. She's been in private practice for 6 years and a licensed MFT for 4 years. Muncie has over 10 years experience working with abuse, and she was a co-facilitator of a 52-week batterers intervention program at Family Service Agency. And she also taught anger management at Family Service Agency, which she continues to assist clients with in her private practice. And then we also have Melissa Jones, the Associate Clinical Social Worker. At the YWCA, she provides crisis intervention services to individuals and families in emergency shelter. And she supports individuals and groups referred for counseling from Sonoma County Family, Youth, and Children's Services. And her primary interest is complex trauma and family systems therapy. So welcome all of you.
Good morning. Okay, I'll have to figure out where to hold this. So I'm going to be talking to you for a few minutes about our agency, the services we provide, and how clients can get connected with our services. Like this? There you go. Okay. All right, next slide, please. So this just outlines what we will be talking about today. And then next slide, please. Next slide. Thank you. So the first thing I wanted to talk to you about is our domestic violence counselor certification training. It's a 40-hour training that takes place twice per year. The training meets the state guidelines, and completion of the training certifies individuals in the state of California as a domestic violence counselor. We welcome people who are interested in volunteering at our agency to come take the training, as well as professionals in the community just looking to add some tools to their tool belts to take back to their workplaces. The training topics include history of domestic violence, overview and dynamics of domestic violence, safety and assessment, the impact of domestic violence on children, and many other topics as well.
Can I ask a question?
Yes.
Are there prerequisites for this training course?
There are not. No prerequisites. There is a cost. I don't know the exact amount, but if you do come to the training and take it, then you can earn back a significant portion of the cost by doing a certain amount of volunteer hours, which I think is like 30 volunteer hours or something. And I also should have mentioned initially, we have many handouts over here as well as brochures, and if you would like a digital version of this PowerPoint presentation, we have a sign-up sheet over here, so we can email this to you as well if you're hoping to take this information with you. So once individuals graduate this training, they are able to volunteer in many different capacities. They can serve at our safe house, on our hotline, at our preschool, restraining order court, at the Family Justice Center, and they can facilitate support groups. Next slide, please. Our safe house was established in 1977 as one of the first 15 battered women's shelters in the country. It provides refuge and a confidential location. It's a 7-bedroom, 27-bed home. We welcome single women, women with children, and recently we've started accepting men. While residing there, our clients receive case management services and have the option to engage in therapy and support groups. To access our safe house, clients can call our hotline to do a screening where they will be guided through a series of questions to determine their eligibility. Next slide, please. Oh, great, thank you. Our hotline is answered 24 hours a day and receives up to 3,000 calls per year. Callers can obtain information about domestic violence. They can get information about community resources, assistance with safety planning, and they can do a screening for our safe house as well as to do screening for our support groups. Next slide, please. Therapy services. So we have an amazing therapy team at the YWCA. We utilize supervised MFT and ASW interns as well as licensed MFTs. Historically, we have seen individual adults and children, and we have also had therapist-facilitated groups. As our program has been expanding over the past year, we have been starting to serve families as well as couples, and we are about to add a few new groups as well. Yes.
Do the services apply only to Sonoma County, or are they available in Marin County and in other areas of the Bay Area?
As far as clients accessing our services, call
How's the hotline of therapy?
hotline, anyone can call from anywhere. Therapy services are provided here in Sonoma County, but they can, travel from out of county to access them. Safe House, it's depending on the availability of beds out of county versus in county. It varies. So our therapy, getting back to our therapy services, we offer sliding scale fee therapy, and we also accept victims compensation. At this time, we do not accept private insurance. And as you can see, we see a lot of, these are some statistics from 2015 as far as how many clients we've served. Next slide, please. Our support groups. So we offer our Domestic Violence 101 support groups. They are free and are 16 sessions long. They're facilitated by staff and trained volunteers. We have groups in Spanish and in English. Each group is a different topic. The topics vary from defining what is domestic violence to setting boundaries, anger management, creating healthy relationships, and more. We have a diverse group of clients in each group. Women come different ages, different backgrounds. They've been in different types of relationships. Some women come because they think they might be in an abusive relationship and they're not sure. Some come because they know they're in an abusive relationship and they're thinking about leaving. And some come because they've left a relationship and they're looking to heal from that experience. And in order to access our support groups, they can call the hotline. Next slide, our Family Justice Center. So the Family Justice Center of Sonoma County empowers individuals to live free from violence and abuse by providing comprehensive services centered on and around the victim through a single point of access. It is a co-location of a multidisciplinary team of professionals who work together under one roof to provide coordinated services to victims of domestic violence, elder abuse, and sexual assault. It is identified as a best practice in the field of domestic violence and prevention services and is one of 15 family justice centers in the state of California. The goal is to have one in each county. Our Family Justice Center opened in 2011, and as of 2015, we had served 5,508 clients. Clients can walk in Monday through Friday, 8:30 a.m. to 4:30 p.m., and meet with any of our on-site partners. Partners include Verity, Council on Aging, Intertribal Council, Legal Aid, Catholic Charities, Sonoma County District Attorney's Victim Services Office, and law enforcement is located there as well. Clients can receive advocacy services. They can fill out restraining orders, get assistance with the U visa. They can fill out victim compensation paperwork, and more. Next slide, court accompaniment. So we provide court accompaniment to individuals obtaining a domestic violence restraining order. Volunteers accompany clients to court as a support person. They are not legal advocates, but provide moral support to clients by informing them about court processes, legal terminology, safety planning, and simply by being an ally in the courtroom. Next slide, please. Our domestic violence response team is a partnership between us and the Santa Rosa Police Department. The goal is to provide and promote victim advocacy in a timely manner. When Santa Rosa Police Department is called out to a domestic violence scene, they offer to have one of our advocates come out to the scene to support the victim. If the victim declines, they also offer for one of our advocates to call them afterward to talk about services that are available to them. Thank you. Our preschool, we have a preschool called A Special Place, and it is the only therapeutic preschool in Sonoma County. The teachers there are credentialed by the state of California Department of Education in early childhood education. As a therapeutic preschool, we work extensively with 3 to 5-year-old at-risk children, helping them identify their emotions and develop socially. While they are attending preschool, the children are eligible to receive free weekly therapy sessions during their school day. And we have various other partnerships. One is with the Sonoma Works office. We have an advocate located there. So when a person goes in attempting to get financial assistance and they disclose abuse in their relationship, they're able to be connected with an advocate right there in their office. We have a partnership with Alliance Medical Center to provide advocacy via Skype. It is intended to help connect their patients to our services when they live in rural areas and they're not able to travel all the way down to Santa Rosa. We have a contract with Family, Youth, and Children's Services to provide individual therapy to adults, children, and as well as groups for families that have open CPS cases. And our Coaching Boys into Men program is an evidence-based prevention program that equips school athletic coaches to talk with their male athletes about the importance of building healthy relationships. So that is an overview of our agency and all of its different services. I'm available after the talk to answer any other questions, and then we have our brochures over here as well. And so I'm going to turn the mic over to Melissa Jones, who will be talking to you next.
Can you hear me now? So hi, I'm Melissa, and I'm going to be talking to you a little bit about domestic violence and giving you some statistics about the characteristics and the scope and scale of domestic violence and its impact on individuals and the family system. So next slide, please. Sometimes it can be helpful to start with some statistics. You may be familiar with some of these. These statistics I'm going to be showing you come from predominantly U.S. and California Departments of Justice, and also from the Centers for Disease Control. In the last reporting period that the U.S. Department of Justice submitted for the 10 years ending 2012, their report was that domestic violence accounted for almost a quarter of all of the violent victimizations in the U.S. And just to give you a scale of that, in 2012, there were 8 million violent victimizations in the U.S. So out of that 21%, by far the vast majority involves intimate partner violence. That's boyfriends, girlfriends, spouses, and ex-spouses. And of that group, boyfriends and girlfriends are by far the most violent. The other 6% is involving family members, and out of this 6%, siblings, interestingly enough, are the most violent. California Department of Justice reported for 2014 that there were almost 160,000 DV-related calls. This is where the police actually rolled out to a call. And what we don't know out of these statistics is how many children were actually in those households at the time these calls were made. Odds are fairly high number, in the tens of thousands. And we see many of these children in the work we do at the Y. Next slide, thanks. So violent victimization is a collection of many different types of what the Department of Justice calls Index 1, or very violent crimes. It's probably no surprise that 3/4 of those violent victimizations are against women, although we do see some against men, in fact. And women who are of childbearing age between 18 and 34 are most likely to be victimized. And of the intimate partner violence victims, the vast majority have children under the age of 18. So again, the statistics show there's quite a high correlation between DV and stress and anxiety and depression for children. Another important statistic can be to understand the relationship of substance abuse to domestic violence, and this number also comes from the Department of Justice. Approaching half of victims report, and this number might be low, that they used alcohol or drugs on the day they were assaulted. And Muncie will have a little bit more information coming up about substance abuse and domestic violence. Next slide, please. So there is much DV that is not a violent crime. In fact, more domestic violence cannot be reported as a violent crime, unfortunately. That embraces psychological and emotional abuse, economic and spiritual abuse, and it involves various forms of intimidation and shaming. It's done in systematic ways. It often is over a long period of time, and the goal is always to achieve or maintain power and control. Next slide. So moving to look at our population, the individuals and families and couples we serve here in Sonoma County, we track pretty closely with the federal and state statistics. Over 90% of our adult clients are female. They're between 21 and 35. They have at least one child under 21, and often it's 2 or 3. They're extremely to very low income, and if we follow the Community Development Commission framework for who falls in those categories, those incomes range from $22,000 to $32,000 a year for a family of 3. So divide that by 12. We're not talking about a lot of money every month. The majority of our child clients are males, and this tracks with the research where it has been shown that in families where there is domestic violence, it is more likely to see boy children with conduct disorder issues as they move into school. Girls, on the other hand, will internalize more of their stress and anxiety. Next slide. So for many of our, well, I would say most of our clients, we see what we call co-occurring vulnerabilities. And this involves often complex or type 2 trauma, where the distressing experiences have occurred systematically over a long period of time, generally at the hands of trusted caregivers. We see a number of mental health issues coming through the door, impairment in cognitive, emotional, and behavioral issues for both adults and children. And we see substance abuse. I would have to say in the time, almost 2 years I've worked at the Y, I have had 2 clients who have stated that they have never had substance abuse issues out of all the clients I work with. Many of the clients that I work with come from referrals through the Children and Family Services, and often these clients have completed a treatment program, or they are concurrently in treatment and in therapy. And this will be a requirement if you're in family reunification, and it will be something that Family, Youth, and Children's Services will be watching if you're in family maintenance after reunification. So often I get asked the question, which comes first? You know, what leads to what? And that's a very hard question to answer, because if you think about someone who has grown up in a family where there has been quite a lot of domestic violence and abuse, the trauma is there for sure, but when do the mental health issues actually start? And how do those present? And how do those lead to more trauma? And when does the substance abuse start? I have clients who talk about starting using drugs at age 11, and I'm sure there are some who have actually started earlier than that. So next slide. We talked a little bit about how we might tell you what we see in our clients at the agency. So we took a stab at a list of frequent diagnoses that we encounter. This is not a perfect list, but it does reflect much of what we see. No surprise, PTSD would be at the top of the list, I guess. What is very helpful to us is the new subtype for PTSD in preschoolers that's in the DSM-5. So we do a great deal of play therapy with the children, and we definitely can begin to see the stress coming out in the play and the anxiety. We see dysthymia in adults and children. We see insomnia disorder in a lot of our adults, and this is an interesting one because often we learn from our clients that insomnia, which is distinguished from the sleep disruption of PTSD, can be a precursor to issues with prescription drugs, which can then lead into dances with much more dangerous drugs. We see generalized anxiety disorder and agoraphobia often together. Acute stress disorder may be a clue for us or a precursor to a diagnosis of PTSD. And then in children, we see reactive attachment disorder and some disinhibited social engagement disorder. Next slide. As we begin to work with clients as they come into the Y, we have learned that it is very helpful to take a look at the stressors that they may be dealing with, whether they're environmental, biological, or psychological. This helps us get a fix on what their vulnerability level might be, and it helps target us toward identifying risk factors, which can, again, help us to orient our assessment work as well as our treatment. And it also helps us to identify protective factors. And when we're doing strengths-based work, it's pretty critical that we understand what some of those protective factors are. Next slide. For many of the clients that we work with, the adults in particular, it can be useful to take some time with them to talk about vertical stressors that may impact them as well as horizontal stressors. This work is taken from Bowen Family System Therapy, and I'm going to show you on the next slide an example of how we might use a tool like this with a client, with an adult client. Essentially, the vertical stressors we understand come from the norms and rules of the family, things that are handed down generationally, and horizontal stressors are those things that, whether they're predictable or not, occur through time. And as we begin to talk to clients and explain how the intersection of vertical and horizontal stressors can create very dramatic impact, we can have some breakthroughs with our clients. So next slide. So this is an example of the type of stressor mapping that we might do with some clients. And we would not do this kind of mapping until we were assured that we had a client who had achieved some safety and stability, which Maggie is going to talk to you about today. And often when our clients come in, they are very skilled at their own narrative. They tell their own story pretty well. And this can be a good place to start to kind of involve them and get them talking. So that purple line along the bottom is a narrative that has been set out according to a timeline of, from birth to current age. Usually when I do this work, I act as scribe for the client to let them talk, and we work back and forth over time to fill things out. It becomes quite an interesting discussion and exploration. And after we've done that, then my contribution will be to work with the client to guide them to understand, thinking back, what did those vertical stressors sound like, look like, feel like over time? And as we work through creating a map like this, we can begin to open up ideas for the client that maybe some of the ideas that I've held or some of the beliefs that I've held, I really don't have to hold on to any longer. It's possible to set them down and move on. Next slide. One last thought I'd like to leave you with. The Centers for Disease Control has some really excellent material on their website about the social-ecological model, and they're putting a lot of effort into developing material that could be available to people in the community to help clients understand how they fit into their world. And the CDC really recommends teaching about systems, family systems, community systems, broader social systems. It recommends teaching about generational DV to understand impact over time, those vertical stressors. And they encourage identifying strategies to achieve safety and stabilization, again, which Maggie will be talking about. So a big question around this point of safety and stabilization we find is important with clients is to ask, who is it actually safe to be with? Often clients, when they've come through a trauma, will have a tendency to want to turn to the people who have always been there for them. Unfortunately, those may be the people who have the old labels, the old expectations, the old ways of thinking, and it makes it much harder for that change to happen. And finally, we recognize how important it is to address the roles of abusers, and this is in the plural for a reason. We see more women now getting in the backs of police cars. They're now getting charged. They're now involved in the abuse that's happening. So it can be very important to denormalize abusive behavior, not just the perpetrator, but what's going on for the victim/survivor as well. And as we reflect on the survivor as an abuser, we have to take them through a discussion. Was it the pathology of you being a bad person, or was this you protecting yourself? So that can be a very helpful approach as well. So that's it for me. I'm going to introduce Muncie as our next speaker. Unfortunately, I have to leave. I apologize. I have left my cards on the table, and if there are any questions I can answer, B could let me know and I could respond to you. So thank you very much.
Okay, hi. Thank you, B and Melissa, for the latest information on DV resources in Sonoma County and the impact of DV on the family. I will discuss the assessment process and educational tools in therapeutic work with individuals and couples who have had or are actively experiencing DV. I feel the value of assessment is understated. The more complete the assessment, the more effective will be your treatment. To assess for DV, I use the Abusive Behavior Inventory from psychologytherapy.net, which can be downloaded, but I see that B has printed out some of the abusive behavior inventory, so please take it with you today. I like the form because it can be used with both the victim and the perpetrator. The form breaks down the abusive behavior into the physical, verbal, emotional, sexual, financial, and legal abuse. After completing this form with your client or couple, the therapist will know what is happening in the relationship. Also, there is a shorter inventory called the Abusive Behavior Inventory Partner Form, which is 30 questions, and it has been designed by Dr. Shepard and Campbell. Next slide, please. As you continue your assessment, it is critical to assess for the specific risk factors of alcohol and drug abuse.
Can I ask you just a quick question about your abusive inventory, behavior inventory? You mentioned that it was good for both alleged offenders and victims.
Right.
And then you also mentioned that there's a second one as the partner one.
Yeah.
Do you use the same form for both, or do you use the different forms for this?
You can use either one. I mean, this one, the abusive inventory, is the long one. It takes a little longer to do. The other one is 30 questions, and it's faster, but they're both effective. Okay. Let's see. It's important to understand the relationship between substance abuse and violence. The U.S. Department of Justice reports that 75% of victims in abusive relationships who use alcohol or drugs are with partners who also abuse substances, and that a victim's use of alcohol can be a barrier to leaving a violent relationship. When working with a couple or victim with DV, the main focus of therapy is psychoeducational and the treatment of trauma. In my previous work of being a facilitator for the Batters Prevention Program with Family Service Agency, later called Sonoma Family Service Agency, I recognized that the majority of perpetrators were victims of abuse or experienced witnessing DV in the home. The therapist will be working with both the victim and perpetrator for trauma. As you have heard many times today, the importance factor is to remember the safety of your client and children who are experiencing DV, and to not blame the victim. Therapists know that DV is not a reportable crime unless there are children in the home witnessing DV. Children exposed to domestic violence experience emotional and psychological abuse, which is reportable to Child Protection Services. Next slide, please. Now I will talk about the tools to use in educating your clients. The education begins with teaching your clients what is abusive behavior. It is helpful to use the power and control wheel as a tool in defining the different types of abusive behavior. Many people don't know that intimidation, threats, and isolation are abusive behaviors. When I was facilitating the Batters Prevention Program, many of the men would say, "I didn't know that taking her cell phone or her car keys away was abusive behavior." Well, yes, it is intimidating and threatening abusive behavior. Next slide, please. Equally important to use the equality wheel as a tool to teach what a healthy relationship looks like in contrast to an unhealthy relationship. Many of our clients were not modeled healthy relationships. Next, please. Another important tool is a cycle of abuse, which helps your client and couple to understand the stages of abuse, starting with the explosion, that's the actual abuse, the loss of control. Then it goes into the honeymoon phase, which usually feels and looks good. The abuser is sorry and apologetic. That's the hearts and flowers stage. There may be gifts, lots of romance. And then we go into the tension building, which may consist of minor incidents of emotional or physical abuse, and the victim feels the growing tension. They usually say it's like walking on eggshells. The victims try to control the situation to avoid violence, but they're unable to control the abuser. And then it cycles back and becomes then the explosion stage. And you will notice that denial is in the middle of the cycle. Denial is minimizing the abuse or acting as if it did not happen. It keeps the cycle going. Perpetrators, victims, and society at large minimize violence in relationships. Explore with your clients when they experience abuse by their partners, how it feels internally and externally. These two forms, the power and control wheel and the cycle of abuse, are on the table, and please take them today with you as you leave. Have these tools available in session to help your clients understand what is abusive behavior, how it looks, how it feels, how it impacts their partner and their family. Next, please. Equally important to work with your clients' anger issues, their triggers and automatic behaviors, which can lead to DV. I use the anger log, which was changed by the facilitators at Family Service Agency to a more sensitive name of It Bugged Me log. The Bug Me log identifies and deconstructs a specific reaction or situation. It shows each stage of how the individual reacts to the trigger, to their trigger. The automatic behavior can be a small reaction, such as irritation, or something much bigger, such as hitting or pushing. The angry individual goes into their survival brain. And unfortunately, the printer broke and we didn't get to print out the Bug Me logs, but it looks like this, and it's really handy to use with your client. And if your name's on the email list, we can email them to you so you can have one. Treating the anger and substance abuse issues of our clients is the best prevention against domestic violence. I'm thrilled to announce that the Y is going to start an anger management program. The program will be 10 weeks long. It will be open to the public. It will offer a sliding scale fee, and the Y will receive referrals from the courts. Next slide, please. I would like to mention 3 important factors if you are going to treat couples in active DV. The first factor is the assessment of specific risk factors, which is assessing for the substance abuse, the violent behavior, and power differential in relationships. And to recognize and continually scan for the dynamic shifts in the relationship depending on the couple stage in the cycle of abuse. It's important to do safety check-ins with a couple for physical danger. Next slide, please. The second factor is the importance of focusing on physical safety of the victim in treatment and the safety check-ins. Privately assess the victim for danger. Valuable tools for assessing danger are the Assessment of Danger form by Dr. Jacqueline Campbell. And we also have some copies on the table, so please take the Assessment of Danger form with you today. And also the Personalized Safety Plan. Your client, the victim, needs to feel prepared if feeling threatened. Work together with your client using the personalized safety plan to have specific strategies of how to leave an unsafe situation and important items to take with them. Next slide, please. The power differential between victim and perpetrator in the family system, the differences of who heads the household, the main wage earner, who controls the money, the physical strength, the transportation, who has use of the car, and the exposure, and the community and family network, which is their support system, and exposure to generational cultural DV. Next slide, please. You may be thinking, no way am I going to be working with a couple experiencing active DV, but sometimes it happens unexpectedly. You may be working with a couple, you've seen them for a few sessions, maybe 4 or 5 sessions, and then one day in session, one of the partners may just blurt out, "I just can't forgive you for throwing that shoe at me. I can't trust you. How can I trust you?" So there you are, the therapist, and your antenna is up and it's moving all around, and you're wondering, well, what do I do with this? Well, what you do with it, you name it. You give it language. You call it domestic violence. And then you assess if it's active DV or a past incident. There is considerable debate about the appropriateness of counseling couples with active DV. Today, the researchers' thoughts on treating DV, couples with DV, over individual treatment is that the couples therapy offers several benefits. It gives the therapist a more accurate picture of the violence, it allows for the same information to be given to both parties, and it allows for uniform treatment strategies. Next slide. The treatment strategies consist of identification of abusive behaviors, build communication skills, address anger management, understand triggers, and teach techniques to regulate emotions. Next slide. Treatment of couples with DV is complex. Here are some suggestions if you decide to continue counseling couples with DV. What I do is I have the perpetrator sign a no violence and no threats of violence contract, and we also have the victim sign as a witness. Then I schedule individual treatment sessions with each partner to assess the level of abusive behaviors. The therapist needs to be direct in addressing the seriousness of DV as a crime. Then I inform the couple that after assessments of each partner, what treatments would be appropriate for the couple, which could be either individual therapy for each partner, and then I give referral to the YWCA, or anger management for the abusing partner, or to continue couples therapy. Next slide. If you decide to continue couples therapy, recognize the potential danger to the victim. You may be putting your client in grave danger by what is revealed in session. The abusing partner may become angry and act out in session, and when home become violent, harming their partner, harming his or her partner. The awareness of potential danger to your client is extremely important. Continue assessing for red flags and danger in the relationship. Next, please. Another important factor for the therapist is to recognize his or her biases toward the abusing partner. The therapist may experience transference and countertransference. You may want to rescue the victim and/or blame the perpetrator. The therapist's own unresolved issues may trigger feelings of anger and hurt from past relationships. Next, please. It is so important for the therapist to be in professional consultation with colleagues. I can't stress this enough, to have counseling or therapy to identify and process your feelings and biases, so that the therapist can maintain neutrality with your clients and have or develop compassion for both the victim and the perpetrator. The work is demanding, and the therapist needs to examine his or her resiliency and self-help practices. In your private practice, you probably will see very few couples experiencing active DV. The perpetrator is, if he's formally charged and sentenced by the court for domestic violence, they are mandated to attend the Batters Prevention Program in Sonoma County. That's a 52-week program. Now, I hope this presentation has been helpful for you in working in your therapeutic work with your clients. Go ahead.
The anger management class, is that only for people that have been court referred?
No, it's open. The one that the Y is going to be starting, it's open to the public. You probably will not be mandated, but sometimes it is by the court. The judge may say you need to have 4 sessions of anger management.
But you can send, like if I had a couple.
Yes, you can send referrals to the Y once it gets started. Yeah, okay. Did you have a question, John?
I did have a question. So, although not recommended, but sometimes we find ourselves in counseling therapy sessions with clients where there is active DV. At what point, realizing that DV by itself for a therapist is not mandatory reporting, but at what point does it cross maybe into a terrorist thought reporting? Or we have to involve local law enforcement if there's an active threat or... Steps for that, or do you have any tips on that?
That's a difficult question. You have to be aware if you feel danger that there's going to be imminent threat. But if you've been working with a couple, you have the inkling to know them, but you have to be aware all the time and keep assessing for danger. And that one assessment form, danger assessment form, will help to ask questions, and maybe you can get a better feel of how much danger there actually is in a relationship. So I don't know if that's it.
It's unethical for me to report domestic violence unless it crosses over to a terrorist thought where there's serious bodily harm threat. That's my understanding.
Well, no, that's true. But usually the perpetrator in session, I think it's probably really rare where they're going to say, I have a gun and I'm going to shoot you. So, but no, definitely you need to be aware of it, and it's difficult when dealing with domestic violence, definitely. Okay, thank you very much.